For 20 long years, my son didn't speak a single word to me. Not on my birthdays, not on Father's Day, not even when I was sick and alone in the hospital. I thought I had lost him forever. But the moment I became rich, suddenly he invited me to Christmas dinner. He thought I'd walk in, desperate for love, blinded by his sudden affection. But what I told him that night shocked everyone. My name is Richard Miller. I'm 65 years old, a retired carpenter, and for most of my life, I lived quietly, never chasing wealth or fame. I believed in hard work, honesty, and family, especially family. My son, David, was once the light of my life, my reason for pushing through long nights at the workshop and endless overtime jobs. But life has a way of breaking the heart in ways you never expect. Before I take you deeper into my story, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. When David was a boy, he was everything to me. His mother passed away when he was just 7, and I had to raise him alone. I gave up everything to make sure he had the best I could offer. I sold my late wife's jewelry to pay for his private school. I skipped meals so he could have new shoes for basketball. I even turned down a promotion once because it required longer hours, and I didn't want him to grow up without a father at home. I worked with my hands every day, repairing furniture, building cabinets, sometimes even working late into the night at construction sites. My palms were calloused, my back ached, but every time I saw David smile or heard him call me Dad, it felt worth it. When he graduated from high school, I cried like a child in the audience. When he got into college, I celebrated by pulling out the last savings I had hidden in a coffee tin, money I was saving for my retirement. I handed it all to him with pride, telling him, "Son, this is for your future. Build something better than I ever could." But life rarely rewards sacrifice the way we expect. At first, David called often. He'd check in, sometimes even visit during holidays. But as the years passed, the calls grew less frequent. When he married, things changed faster. His wife, Claire, was from a wealthy family, polished, elegant, the kind of woman who looked at my calloused hands with barely concealed disgust. I remember the first dinner at their house after the wedding. She served wine I couldn't pronounce and laughed when I asked for a simple beer instead. David laughed too. It was small, almost harmless at first, but it cut deep. Slowly, the gap between us grew. Invitations stopped coming. My phone calls went unanswered. When I showed up at their doorstep one Thanksgiving, bringing a homemade pumpkin pie, Claire looked shocked, almost offended, as if my presence embarrassed her. David stood there, awkward, and said, "Dad, maybe it's better if you call first before coming over." That was the beginning of the end. The calls stopped completely. Birthdays passed in silence. Christmas after Christmas, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a single candle lit, pretending it didn't hurt. But it did. Every year, it tore me apart a little more. 20 years. That's how long my son ignored me. People say time heals all wounds, but they don't talk about the ones that never close. Mine stayed open, bleeding quietly every day. I'd walk past families in the park, fathers playing catch with their sons, and I'd feel a lump in my throat. On Sundays, I'd sit in church, listening to sermons about forgiveness, but deep inside, I wrestled with bitterness. Why? Why was I left alone after giving everything I had? Neighbors would ask me about David. "Haven't seen your boy around in years, Richard. How's he doing?" I'd force a smile and say, "He's busy with work," while my heart screamed the truth. He doesn't care anymore. The loneliness became unbearable sometimes. On my 62nd birthday, I lit a candle on a small cupcake I bought myself, whispered a wish for my son to call, and blew it out in silence. The phone never rang. And then when I least expected it, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sipping black coffee at my worn-out kitchen table, the radio playing. Softly in the background, a lawyer's voice suddenly interrupted my quiet life. "Mr. Miller?" He said on the phone. "I represent a distant cousin of yours, Margaret Evans. She recently passed away, and in her will, she left you her estate." I was stunned. Margaret was a woman I barely knew. We'd met a few times at family reunions decades ago. But apparently she had no children, no close relatives, and somehow I was listed as her heir. I thought maybe it was a small house or a bit of land. But when the papers arrived, my knees nearly gave out. She had left me not just a property, but a fortune. Stocks, bonds, real estate, altogether worth nearly $70 million. $70 million. I sat in silence, the documents trembling in my hands. For decades, I had lived paycheck to paycheck, counting coins for groceries, patching old jackets, fixing broken shoes instead of buying new ones. And now, suddenly, I was a wealthy man. At first, I laughed. Then I cried. I cried harder than I had in years. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. For once in my life, I wasn't invisible. Fate had finally looked my way. But as I wiped my tears, another thought crept in. David. What would he do when he found out? When I first realized I was suddenly worth $70 million, my mind was spinning. For 3 nights straight, I barely slept. I sat in my living room staring at the inheritance papers, my old clock ticking on the wall, reminding me of every second I had lived in loneliness. I thought about what this wealth meant. A part of me felt alive again, like maybe I could finally do things I had only dreamed of. Travel, fix up my home, donate to the church, maybe even set up a scholarship for kids like David once was. But the darker part of me couldn't forget the past. Money didn't erase the birthdays I spent alone, the Christmases where my chair sat empty at the family table, or the years my phone never rang. I kept telling myself, "Don't let this change you, Richard. Stay humble. Stay the man you've always been." But deep down I knew this wealth wasn't just money. It was power. And for the first time, I had the power to choose how my son would be part of my life. Or not at all. It didn't take long for the world to find out. Wealth has a way of echoing louder than secrets ever can. A week later, I was in town, picking up groceries like always. But suddenly, people treated me differently. The cashier smiled too wide. The neighbor who usually ignored me waved and said, "Morning, Mr. Miller." And then the call came. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 2 decades. David. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My hand trembled. I thought it was a mistake, maybe a wrong number. But no, it was him. I let it ring and ring. And finally, with a deep breath, I answered, "Dad?" His voice was calm, too calm, almost rehearsed. "It's me. It's David." My throat closed up. 20 years of silence, and suddenly he was on the other end of the line, as if nothing had happened. "Dad? Listen," he continued. "I know it's been a long time, too long, but I was thinking maybe we should reconnect. Christmas is coming. Claire and I would love for you to join us this year." As he spoke, I wasn't hearing the words. My mind dragged me back through time, to the Thanksgiving when Claire turned me away with my pumpkin pie, to the lonely birthdays, to the countless voicemails that went unanswered. And now, after 20 years of silence, he wanted me at his Christmas table. I whispered, "Why now, David?" He paused, then gave a soft laugh. "Because you're my dad. Family matters. It always has." But his words felt like poison wrapped in honey. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. Part of me wanted to believe him, to rush into his arms, to finally have my son back, to hear the word Dad spoken with love again. But the older, wiser part of me knew better. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see my grandchildren, the ones I had never met. Maybe Christmas could be the start of something new. Or maybe it would be the final betrayal. Before making any decisions, I met with a lawyer, a sharp young man named Jacob. He leaned across his desk, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Miller, I've seen cases like this before. Estranged family members suddenly reconnecting after hearing about wealth. If I may be blunt, you need to protect yourself." I nodded. "What do you suggest?" "Establish a trust. Lock the assets in legal safeguards. That way, no one, not even your son, can manipulate you into giving away your fortune. You decide who benefits and when." I hesitated. "But what if he truly wants to reconnect? What if this is real?" Jacob gave me a look filled with pity. "Sir, love doesn't suddenly come alive when a bank account does." His words stung, but deep down I knew he was right. So I signed the papers. By the time I left his office, my wealth was legally untouchable. David could charm, beg, or manipulate, but he would never lay his hands on a single dollar unless I wanted him to. A week before Christmas, I received a letter in the mail. A formal invitation. Christmas Eve dinner at David and Claire's residence. 6 p.m. Family gathering. Family. The word felt like both a dream and a lie. I stared at the letter for hours. Finally, I decided I would go. Not because I believed in David's sudden affection, but because I needed closure. The night before Christmas Eve, I sat at my table, staring at the wrapped gifts I had bought. Not expensive ones, just small things. A toy train for the grandson I had never met. A doll for the granddaughter whose birthday I had missed every year. I whispered to myself, maybe they'll see me for who I am, not what I have. But as I packed those gifts into a bag, I remembered every Christmas alone, every chair left empty for me. My heart hardened again. Finally, Christmas Eve arrived. I wore my best suit, the same one I had bought for David's wedding all those years ago. My hair was neatly combed, my shoes polished. When I arrived at their grand house, decorated with lights and wreaths, my stomach knotted. I knocked on the door, and it swung open to reveal David. He smiled too wide. "Dad, you made it." He hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that feels more like a performance than love. Claire appeared next, her smile as polished as ever. "Richard, welcome. It's been far too long." Her eyes flickered, though, not with warmth, but calculation. Inside, the house glowed with Christmas lights. The table was set with fine china. Laughter echoed from the living room, where two children played, my grandchildren. My heart swelled and broke all at once. David clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on in, Dad. Tonight's about family." But as I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't about family. It was about money. The dinner table looked like something from a magazine. Candles flickering, golden plates gleaming, turkey steaming in the center. But under the shine, I could feel the tension crawling beneath the surface. David pulled out a chair for me, seating me right at the head of the table. "Dad deserves the best spot tonight," he announced. Everyone clapped politely. For a brief moment, I let myself enjoy it. My grandchildren sat across from me, their curious eyes sparkling. They didn't know me, but they weren't poisoned yet by greed. Their innocence was my only comfort that night. All through dinner, David poured me wine, served me extra turkey, asked about my health. Claire laughed at my old jokes as if they were hilarious. It almost felt real. Almost, but beneath their smiles, I could see the hunger in their eyes. They weren't hungry for food. They were hungry for something far bigger. Finally, after dessert, the truth began to slip out. David leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink. Dad, it's incredible what happened to you. $70 million. Wow, you must feel overwhelmed. I nodded slowly. It doesn't change who I am, he chuckled. Of course, of course. But you don't have to keep it all to yourself. Family is here for you. We could help you manage it, invest it, use it wisely. Claire jumped in smoothly. Yes, Richard, imagine how wonderful it would be to put that money into a trust for the children and for us to oversee it. I stared at them, my fork frozen in my hand. The mask had slipped. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about reconnecting, Dot. It was about control. About taking from me what they thought they deserved. David leaned closer. Dad, think of everything I've done. I built a family, a home. All I'm asking is that you include us. You can't possibly spend all that money on your own. I finally spoke, my voice sharp. You didn't speak to me for 20 years, David. Not a call. Not a visit. Not even when I was in the hospital with pneumonia. And now, suddenly, you want to help me manage my money? The room fell silent. My grandchildren looked at me with wide eyes, sensing the storm. I rose slowly from the table, placing my napkin down. My voice trembled at first, but soon it grew stronger. For 20 years, I was dead to you. I sat alone every Christmas, watching other fathers walk with their sons. I kept a photo of you by my bed, wondering what I had done wrong. I left messages on your phone, begged for 5 minutes of your time. But you cut me off. Tears burned in my eyes. And now, because of money, suddenly I'm family again? You don't love me, David. You love my fortune. David's face flushed red. That's not true. It is true, I interrupted. You only opened your door because of my bank account. But let me tell you something. Respect is worth more than riches. And you've given me none. The room froze as I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside were the legal documents Jacob had prepared. I placed them on the table. This, I said firmly, is proof that not a single dollar of my fortune is in your hands. Every penny is locked away, protected. You can't touch it. David's eyes widened. Claire's mouth dropped open. Continued, instead, I've decided to use my wealth to help children who were abandoned, just like I was. Scholarships, shelters, programs for kids who need love. Kids who won't be ignored the way I was ignored by my own son. David slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this. I'm your son. That money should come to me, to my family. I looked him dead in the eyes. A son is not defined by blood, David. A son is defined by love, by loyalty, by respect. And you've shown me none of that. Claire tried to intervene, her voice shrill. Richard, you're being unreasonable. I raised a hand. No, for 20 years I was silent. For 20 years I swallowed the pain. But tonight I speak. My truth. I am not unreasonable. I am finally free. I gathered my coat. The children stared at me, confused but innocent. I leaned down and handed them the small wrapped gifts I had brought. These are for you, I whispered softly. Merry Christmas. Then I turned back to David. My final words echoed through the dining room like thunder. You had 20 years to invite me back into your life. You chose silence. Tonight, I choose silence in return. But this time, it's permanent. And with that, I walked out into the snowy night, Dot. As the cold air hit my face, I felt lighter than I had in decades. For once, the silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I realized something that night. Wealth doesn't change people. It reveals them. My son's greed had been there all along, hidden beneath excuses. The money only uncovered it. And me? I finally understood that love and respect are priceless. No amount of money can buy them, Dot. so I invested in a foundation for abandoned children. Every dollar went to building futures, not feeding greed. And though I lost my son, I gained something greater: dignity, purpose, and the strength to finally stand tall. If you've ever believed respect matters more than money, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.